How is again? I had a chap on Facebook ask me what about the occult and music industry. I can't answer a question like that in a Facebook message. It's just where do you even begin? Uh, so I'm kind of answering this question for that man here, and also uh, it's easier than writing it down. And I'm busy and I'm a lazy fucker when it comes to messages and emails and stuff. The music industry and the occult. Well, you have to first talk about and pop music and all that stuff and defining it. What do you actually mean by the occult? Now, if you talk about the occult in terms of the esoteric, absolutely. That's why concerts are played at night, why they're lit the way they are, why they have pyrotechnics, why they take places in venues with names like the Forum and the Adelphi and the Colosseum. So that's, that aspect of the occult part, absolutely bang on. But that's not like esoteric in the sense that it's magic or something like that. That's classical paganism and the power of the Greek mystery plays brought up into modern performance, because they have an effect on the human nervous system and a neurochemistry system that causes you to be brought into transcendental states while you're seeing an amazing band live and so on, or even opera performances. It really started in the modern era with the Wagner operas. Now, what I think that fella meant was, in terms of people in the music industry being occultists and pop stars being occultists, first of all, I want to say there's probably no more field of alternative research that is next to British Israelism, claiming that like the Tuatha De Danann come from Noah and all this shit, and Scotia's grave is in Ireland. Next to that monumental bullshit, the biggest monument, and it's both rooted in Christianity as well, is to do with this music industry, Satanism and all this stuff that you see. That is all 99.9% absolute unmitigated bollocks, people analysing music videos, and now Miley Cyrus, she's invoking Lilith. That's all crap. That's absolute crap. Now, why is it crap? Well, everything by a Christian must be automatically assumed to be the product of an insane consciousness, especially a born-again Christian. And that's what all that stuff comes from. And even the ones who think they're not Christians, they'll cite sources like that famous guy that I think his name is John something, back in the 70s or 80s, early 80s, made a load of tapes visiting churches and going, Bill Cosby, he's a Satanist, there's a witch, she's a witch, this person's a witch, that person is a witch. Now, what in context, that was a born-again Christian psychotic preaching to other born-again Christian psychotics. And anyone I've never met a born-again Christian who was mentally sound. They're all recovered alcoholics, drug addicts, wife beaters, sex freaks, and they only found Jesus so they wouldn't burn in hell, which doesn't exist anyway. But so anything to them that's not the good book, this King James Bible, is Satan and witches. So when he's talking about things like Stevie Nicks, she's a witch, and Bill Cosby, not Bill Cosby, the guy from Cosby, Stills and Nash, they're warlocks. That just means that they were just hippies who probably got into Wicca for a while. But to a born-again Christian psychotic, simpleton, congenital moron, that's all devil worship and witchcraft, and it's all the same thing, and that's why they call it that. Now, that's the legacy we're living with today. We're living with a legacy from the late 1960s when the occult got really big. See, the thing is that people think the 60s and all that stuff with the flower power children, it was all about love and peace. The occult was massive back then. I have countless numbers of paperbacks from the late 1960s to the mid 1970s of occult books that were all mainstream. The occult was central to people's lives then. You had book magazines out called like Myth-Minded Magic. You had Mysteries of the Unknown magazine collecting, Time Life producing vast volumes on things like magic. Dennis Wheatley was being published constantly, and his books are all real magic but put into fictional stories. And you had so much of that kind of thing. I used to, when I was a kid, a young kid now, I'm talking about 10, 11, I used to go to Easton's bookshop in the centre of Dublin. There's like a 5-story bookshop. And the cult section was enormous. And not because it was an occult bookshop, but because that stuff was completely mainstream back then. And all the hippies got into it in the 60s and 70s. And they all started trying it and practicing it and writing it into their songs. And David Bowie and all the rest of them have all been flirted with things like the Thelema and the OTO and Wicca and all this kind of thing. And it was mostly a passing phase. Many of them made the mistake of doing it while they were drug addicts, like Bowie when he was in Los Angeles. And there were witches to the stars, and they would consult these people. And also a lot of this comes out of the drug scenes. Wherever there's drugs, lots of drugs, there's always the occult, because it draws in entities which take people over. That's why these Mexican gangs are very heavily occultic. Heavy drug scenes, and also an unknown and little talked about dark scene would be country and western music. I'll talk about that later. And that always gets passed over as being wholesome and everything, but there's real dark shit goes on there, probably more than the rock and roll business. Now, as in terms of like when you see these things like Vigilant Citizen, which should be called, Bible Thumper, you'll have all these ridiculous articles saying, and now Madonna, she's invoking Baphomet and all this crap. It's all absolute crap. And half the reason people like those pop stars do that is so they get free publicity in dumbass sites and crazy ass Christians doing that. Now, you hear stories like, what does it mean when they bring a record, they master it and put a gin on it? I've heard those stories too. I don't know if that's true or not, because I don't know what goes on in the centre of Colombia. And you see, the neoclassical stuff never goes away. And Paramount. And you hear these stories. Now, let's talk about people we can absolutely for certain say were in pop music and were absolutely for certain occultists. Madonna. She's open about her Kabbalism. Never hid it. That's Madonna. Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath was doing OTO rituals and flirted with Thelema and was doing Crowley rituals in the early days of Black Sabbath. He says it's all nonsense and bullshit now because he saw how dangerous it is. They were, at one point, Sabbath's success is definitely due to Geezer Butler doing rituals. Absolutely. And I'm not putting down their music. Their music is fantastic and everything, but that's not enough. You need an extra thing. And during the recording of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, they were recording it in a castle, which was converted into a studio. And some of the stories they came out with, the things they saw, they were unbelievable. That was real. Geezer Butler was real. Ridicules it now, but that's only because he's probably trying to discourage people from getting into it. Another one is David Bowie. We know that for a fact. He doesn't hide it in any way. And again, he ridiculed it later on because it got, let me tell you something about magic. People think that, and this is very important for you lot out there who are following my work and thinking of getting into magic. Magic does not guarantee you a happy life. It doesn't make your life happier or immune from troubles. I would say it's actually the worst. It's actually worse. Your life is actually worse because you're a magical practitioner. But that's a small price to pay for becoming basically a godhead. The things that I've seen, the things that I've done, I would not change my life for a second, even though it's cost me a lot personally. I'm basically poor. I'm still having to work my ass off constantly. I don't care. A lot of people that practice, I don't care. What I've got, I'm no fear of death. I know that death is just another thing to another reality. We're reborn again. I'm not. It was worth the price on every level. And so you think you're going to get into occult stuff to be millionaires like David Bowie. Bowie and Geezer Butler and the rest of them became millionaires because they were talented and they worked hard. Same with Madonna. Now, You know, you look at the lives of all the famous occultists, Austin Osman Spare, Crowley, all with the exception, even, you know, even William Butler Yeats, he died in the arse end of France and was buried in a mass grave, and they don't even know if that's his real body. You know, and this is after all his years of success of being, you know, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He was a senator in the Irish Parliament. He did it all. You know, he shagged one of the most beautiful women in the world, Maud Gonne, and it all fell apart for him. It didn't fall apart for him. You know, he had a sad ending, and that's just how it is, and that's okay, because a true occultist will tell you that they don't have a problem with that. That they're ready to pay that price in order to see beyond the veil and to know there's much more to this life than flesh, blood, bones, and, you know, misery. Now, and the elation is, of course, like, amazing as well. When you build up your charisma, you know, you're a magnet for people. You get what they call the X factor, and you can be a bad person and use that to build a cult, or you can be a good person and use that to encourage people to, which I try to do, develop their artistic nature, that kind of thing, and to push them and to get them moving their life in a happy direction, that, you know, the creative direction more than anything. And so it's like the Leanne and She in the Irish folklore, that the fairy you will have the muse fairy, and you'll have a wonderful, creative, magical life, but it won't end happy, and that's the price you pay. You become a living saga, and that's why a lot of musicians like that ended up with problems, like David Crosby and so on. It's now, so that part of the music industry is mostly bullshit. You know, that's all hysterical nonsense by Christians and so on. I'm not saying there's not occultists in the music industry. There is. Absolutely there is. I'm not saying there's not occultists in famous bands you love. I'd be surprised if there wasn't, because I got news for you. You're surrounded, no matter where you live in the world. Like, you know, they say you're never more than 5 meters from a rat anywhere in the world. There's so many rats out there. Well, I can guarantee you're never more than 50 meters from an occultist, a practicing occultist. That's how common it is. So don't see. This is another thing too. It's called the occult for a reason. It's hidden. So just because people don't walk down the street, other than these cosplay druids and these cosplay witches, Wiccans, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. They're fellas and women dressed like me. You wouldn't know them on the streets. They don't go. You do not bring attention to yourself. Otherwise, you lose your charisma, and you develop false charisma. And this is where all the mental illness in those kind of groups comes from. Now, drugs is a big reason why there is this occult in the music industry. Where drugs are in vast numbers, the demons come, because the firewalls are broken down and entry is much easier. And you see this all the time. The 27 Club, they're not sacrificed by the Illuminati. They're sacrificed by darker forces that are bigger than any human force. And that's what happens, is the drugs kill them, except in the case of Brian Jones and Jimi Hendrix were absolutely murdered, no doubt about that. But the others who died of drug overdoses, well, this is what I'm saying, you know, the gift, the grace of the gods, the Dionysian thing. The magical path is also a great performer. And some people can't make it, but they leave a remarkable legacy. And Nashville, the country and western music scene, despite all its wholesomeness, Grand Ole Opry, and all that stuff, is rampant with the dark side, because it's a major drug trafficking center between South America and the USA. And this is, you will find that would be, you think like Miley Cyrus or Madonna or, you know, Marilyn Manson and you know, all these types, they're all real dark sided. You will find the most dark sided of the dark side in Nashville, singing about my dear old country mama. She's the flower of the South. You will find that they're the worst, I guarantee you, because that's the ultimate occult, hiding it behind hiding it behind an image you would never expect it. The ultimate occult. The greatest occultist is the one that you wouldn't have a fucking clue that they were up to it. Wouldn't have a clue. So that's why so many of these great, these like big time church preachers, like, and they have these big stadiums, arena churches, mega churches, and they're going, and the Lord said, not Jesus and not the devil. And you'll find a lot of them are occultists, and that's where they're getting their power and money, and they're spellbinding their dopey parishioners. You'll find Nashville is ravaged with it. And that what's it called, MH13 or whatever they're called, those Mexican gangs, come on, drugs, witchcraft, voodoo, whatever, Santeria, it's all there. See, this is the mistake you impure, unclean Christians make, is that you confuse the performance with the sorcery. And so, he's a devil man, he dresses up like a demon, he's just throwing up the Baphomet and all this stuff. No, it's the one who goes, hi, how are you? And that fucker can walk through realities, he doesn't have to buy plane tickets to go on holidays. He can create astral doubles and leave his body and go on holiday. These people can achieve invisibility. They're the ultimate occultist. And the occult of the occult of the occult is to put up an image that you're a devil man worshipper, and you're like, ooh. Then telling people that you don't do that in real life, but you do it. You play the, oh, look at the guy, he's in a death metal band. He's like, they paint his face up. And he must be worshipping the devil. And he goes on interviews and you see him, oh no, I'm just a regular family man. I'm just, these are my kids. I just do my thing, blah, 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 blah. And then behind that occult of occult, he's the real thing. So this is why you cannot trust these Christians falling for superficial things, because sometimes it isn't and sometimes it is. And that's why it's called the occult. But the occult of the occult of the occult of the occult behind the biggest aspects of the music industry is La Cosa Nostra, the Italian Sicilian Mafia. And that's for another video, because there's two reasons for this. I can't say much because the magical circle in Turin, which I'm a member of on the outs as an honorary member, originally began in Sicily, and so I have to kind of clear what I'm going to say before I shoot my big mouth off. And secondly, that's the ultimate. That's why you're fascinated by the mafia, not because they're criminal gangsters and not because Al Pacino's an amazing actor and The Godfather's a credible film. You're fascinated by the mafia because they're witches. Next time. Devil Man Sheridan.